Hey everyone, the clip you're about to watch is from my new video on bug bounty hunting for client-side injections. It's part 2 of the series and by far my most requested video. I got about 7 hours recorded and edited so far. It's probably going to be at least 10 hours by the time I'm done, so I'm going to keep releasing these clips over the next few weeks while I finish everything up. 10 hours is crazy. The new video is basically going to be a free course on bug bounty hunting for pretty much all forms of cross-site scripting, aside from a few edge cases there. I am going to say these videos take a huge amount of time and effort to make. So please, if you find these helpful, can you take a minute to like and subscribe? I know that sounds silly, but I'm really trying to grow this channel over the next few years, and that help would be greatly appreciated. I never thought I'd say that, but anyway, whatever. The full video should be ready by mid-November. So hopefully these clips will get you started while you're waiting on me to finish the rest. I really hope it helps. Cheers. All right, we are back, and it is now time for us to go back to our reflected cross-site scripting attack vectors that we found before. I've got them both up on all 4 of them up on the screen here. And we're gonna start to build out a plan for weaponizing these if we can get the alert to pop, right? So we're gonna have our entire attack planned out before we even start to go in there and test for different payloads, different output encoding, bypassing these compensating controls, different ways that we can actually get that alert to pop, right? Because there's a lot of times that you can get that alert to fire, you can get the cross-site scripting payload to execute, but you're going to find out later that because of the compensating controls, because of the scope of the application, I mean, there's so many different factors that can determine whether or not you're actually going to be able to weaponize it. So we don't even want to go through the work of trying to get that alert to fire until we know that once we get that alert to pop, we get that cross-site scripting to execute, we are going to be able to convert that into a real attack that shows impact. And that's how we're going to be able to submit it, and it won't be a cross-site scripting as you hear all these different things, right? We're going to be confident we know exactly how we're going to show impact as we deliver this. So if we come back to our reflected attack vectors, if you remember, we had 4 that we looked at, right? This Windstream, ResMed, 8x8, and the one from Mozilla there that does some crashes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and dial in on 2 of these just to make this easier. I'm going to delete these here because we don't need them. I want to focus on these 2 specifically, and I'll tell you why. These 2 different applications, first, they're decent opportunities from what we've seen from the pros that have been able to do, but they also represent 2 completely different strategies that a company will take to prevent client-side injections based on the compensating controls. And it's from what we've seen, it looks like these 2 have gone in the complete opposite direction. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us to show those differences, kind of document it and show how it impacts the different attacks. So if we look at the first one, the primary compensating controls that we found were a web application firewall over here, and then output encoding. A web application firewall, if we remember, is going to check patterns from the incoming HTTP request, and if it sees a pattern that it recognizes that it believes is malicious, so if you just think about it like regex checks, or there's typically pretty simple, although some of them can get more complex, then it will just block it outright before any part of the application has the ability to process to process that user-controlled input. Output encoding as well, so the user-controlled input goes into the application and it renders back out into the DOM. It's designed to ensure that when that user-controlled input reflects in the DOM, it will never be able to execute that alert in the first place. So both of these compensating controls are entirely focused on preventing that the reflected cross-site scripting from executing in the first place, to getting that alert to pop, right? We're not seeing any content security policy from our testing, but the content security policy is going to determine what, it will have an impact on whether the alert can pop, but it'll also have a lot of impact on how that can be weaponized. So for our first target here, for the Windstream target, if we are able to get a client-side injection to execute a reflected cross-site scripting, I believe that we're going to be able to we're going to have a lot of opportunities, let's say, to show impact. Now, we need to go in and look and see, who are available victims, what are the types of attacks that we can do, and that's what we're going to do in a second. But looking at these compensating controls from the way that we evaluated it, I'm they have focused on trying to stop that client-side injection from executing in the first place. They haven't shown a lot of interest in trying to stop it from being weaponized later. So that tells me that if we can circumvent these controls, if we can find a way to get past the Cloudflare WAF, if we can find a way to get this output encoding to fail so that it's actually going to render a valid payload in the DOM, then we're going to have a lot of opportunities to weaponize that show impact and potentially get something like an account takeover or anything. Now, we got to find out if that's even possible. If there's, who's going to be that victim? Whose account are we taking over? What data are we getting there? That's all stuff we've got to look into now. But again, it's just one way of looking at the compensating controls where this tells me, okay, there may be some value here because if I can get this payload to execute, I'm going to have a lot of opportunities. But I want to know exactly what opportunities I'm looking at before I even invest that time, because the largest amount of time for a target like this is going to be trying to get that alert to execute in the first place. Now, if we come down here and look at the 8x8, we see the complete opposite. Now, we didn't do a bunch of digging into output encoding and server-side validation stuff, so it may have those additional steps in there. But just looking at the initial thing, if you remember from the CSRF, we did see a CSRF token, which would prevent weaponization. We have a content security policy that, and we're going to dig into all these here in a minute, but they're okay with, they have unsafe in eval, unsafe in inline, things like that. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to get this payload to execute. I actually think that getting a payload to execute on an 8x8 or on a site like this is going to be much easier. However, you may find out that once you get it to execute, because of the way the content security policy is configured, because of the way the CSRF works, all these, all the different compensating controls may prevent us from being able to weaponize it entirely. So once again, we don't want to go through the process of going and finding a working payload, which can be a huge amount of time, especially for a bug bounty researcher. I want to invest my time where I know it's going to be worth it, right? Now, once we have all this, everything planned and this is who we're going to deliver it to, this is how we're going to deliver it, this is how we're going to weaponize it. Once you have that done, then you're going to step back and then you have to actually get the alert to fire. A lot of times that may not happen. You may not be able to get that alert to fire. So this is what testing for client-side injection looks like, right? You have to, as I've said many times, you have to get the alert to fire. A lot of challenges there. You have to be able to deliver it to a valid victim. There can be some challenges there depending on what it is. And then how are you going to weaponize that? What are you going to target? So all three of those steps, we have to make sure that we have a really firm plan. We have to bypass security controls. A lot of things that have to come together for a client-side injection, for reflected cross-site scripting specifically to work. So okay, let's go ahead and we need to come back and answer our questions. We've started to poke around. We've learned a little bit more. We need to know who is our victim and how are we delivering the payload to our victim, right? Very, very important. So coming back here, I want to know just in general, just do a Google search, right? And we've got our AI here to kind of show us what is Windstream.net. Yeah, and it does for that. It is a webmail service for Windstream customers and is also the company's general service internet portal. So now we should have users with a webmail of some kind that we can target. It's a parent company of that there. So that's most likely, you're really going to have two different, and in fact, I'm going to copy this. I want to get this in my notes as well so that I can remember that. So that'll work there. Right. So with this context, I think there's going to be two different groups of targets essentially that we can focus on here. The first is going to be Windstream users. And then the second is going to be Windstream employees / admins, right? So because this would appear to be, and this is another thing that you typically want to think about as you're identifying it, is it B2B or B2C, right? So does that mean, is it business to business or business to customer? Now, this company itself, and actually, you know what? B2B or B2C. I'm telling you, Google can give you a lot of information. So it is both B2B to B2C. Perfect. So that would include another level for our victims, right? So we have single customer, B2C, and then we have WinStream users company C2C. Can't say. There we go. So now we have 3 different groups of victims that we could target, and the impact on these victims is going to be completely different from everyone, because they do both B2B or B2C. So that means that they sell from a business to an individual customer. So they provide their webmail and everything. That's probably something where you can go and sign up through an automated system. But then they have B2B, all types of different stuff here, right? Wholesale and everything. So you're going to, with this B2B functionality and delivering to other businesses, you're going to have a lot of additional things that need to be applied here, right? You can see there's just like the residential service, whereas a business, enterprise, wholesale, there's going to be a lot of other opportunities to potentially impact that business with your payload. Okay, so out of these 3, I want you to stop and think, which one do you think is the least important? If we were going to show an impact, which of these would I probably say I would care about the least as far as showing impact? The answer, and it might surprise you, is the employees and admins. Now, if we can leverage that access to get further impact on their users, either company or individual, then that's phenomenal. And if we could have a larger blast radius to those. But, and this is pretty typical, I'm not too worried about, or I'm not too interested in finding this company's data and showing them that I can exfiltrate their personal data. I don't like, it's what you will learn, especially working on a blue team, is that, while a company certainly doesn't want their own data to be exfiltrated, if they are the only victim, then it's not as big of an impact to them. Now, I mean, with that being said, if they have some type of intellectual property or something where the company's built around that, then that's a different conversation. But what companies are afraid of is you impacting their users. They're afraid of ending up on the news. They're afraid of reputational damage that is going to have downstream consequences in their ability to grow their business and be successful in their business. So if you just come to them and say, hey, I got your secret code and I'm going to spend, the next 12 months trying to build up something that is going to compete with you, there's a lot of things that have to go wrong before that's going to have really any impact on them. It's not what they want, and there are a lot of ways to show impact with it. But if you can come to them and say, and especially with this company to company, what if you can come to them and say, every single company, every single B2B deal that you have done, I can exfiltrate those company sensitive data, or I can leverage your tool, your web applications to have a negative impact on those customers. Even if it's just one, that's going to be big. But if you can do multiple ones, if you can do across all of them, that is going to get them to jump on that quickly. So this is where it's so important to understand who's your victim, right? We want to start to target these users. I'm not going to try to get something that has an admin, something like that. I want to target the users, ideally these, why did I put C2C? Good grief. B2B. Customer to customer. Yeah, I don't know if that really makes sense. We want to target the B2B customers ideally, and then we can fall back to the single customers, probably more on like the individual webmail and everything if we can, right? Okay, so that gives me a good idea here. Now, we don't know specifically the victim. We want to get as specific with these as possible, but for this, we're at least starting to get, a good understanding. Now, how are we delivering the payload? This is fairly simple. With a reflected cross-site scripting, you really only have one option. The payload needs to be within the URL in some way so that they can click on the link, or you can kind of redirect them. There's a few other ways that we can do it, but for the sake of this video, and especially for the sake of time, good grief, let's just focus in on that. The way that we are going to deliver this payload is payload in URL get parameter delivered via phishing or whatever else, right? Phishing, malicious redirect, something. Anything where we can control the URL where they're going to or get them to click on is how we can deliver that. So this is all looking pretty good. It's going to be a lot of work to be able to actually bypass all these output encoding and everything. It's, in my experience, it's these ones that try to prevent the payload from executing in the first place can be a lot more time consuming and a lot more difficult, but we've got a lot of different options here. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's move over to our 8x8 and let's do the same thing. I think that was right here. Just move that over for the sake of it. Now, and let's come and take a look. I want to know what this is. What is 8x8 supersite? Voice calls, video conferencing, messaging, collaboration tools. So they provide a lot of different cloud communications. I would think is 8x8 B2B or B2C. Let's get an idea of this here. I would imagine they probably have both as well, primarily business to business. Okay, so they're going to focus more on individual business customers. By the way, this would be, and where this one down here, what is 8x8? I want to get the same thing up there. But yeah, so we have this one right here is business to business mostly. And I'll just pull something from here if they have a little blurb or anything. And of course it disappeared. You're going to make me work for it, aren't you? Just go back. I think the first one that we had is probably good. Unified communication platform, I'll grab that as well. So yeah, cloud communication, essentially. It's fine right there. And I'll just put a little bit of separation in between these two so it's easier to see. And that'll work. Okay. So then most likely for this one, it's a little bit straightforward because we've got an authentication in here. So ideally, what we can do, our victim is going to be someone who has the ability to log in to this supersite.8x8.com page and then has, in fact, let's just go ahead and write this out. So who has a valid account for 8x8.com and ideally has higher privileges and free account if you can get a free account. Because I don't know, right? We haven't seen anything that allows us to register. And I want to take a look at that as well. Again, Google's always going to be your friend. Registration. Let's see if we can find a registration page. Nothing is immediately coming up. So this may be a situation where we are unable to, wrong one. This may be a situation where we're not going to be able to create our own account. And it'd be great if we could, because if we could, then just like when we were looking at with the stored cross-site scripting, we would have a lot more insight into understanding what the application is, what it does, and we can craft those payloads to maybe change their password, or we can do all that. Without having visibility into it, we're not going to be able to do that. But if we can exfiltrate a session, if we can do anything there's a lot of different opportunities. So I think for this one, it's going to be fairly simple. And once again, we're going to deliver this with, it's the same answer here. If we find a better way to do it, we can, but for reflected cross-site scripting, typically that's just going to be the default. That's what I typically focus on. And again, the malicious redirect is another way that you can do it very easily, but ultimately you've got to get the victim to do something. But yeah, so for this one here, again, look at the compensating controls. We haven't dug in too much, but I don't think we're going to have as much of an issue getting it to execute, although there's a lot less opportunities for where it's being reflected. So there's a lot less. If you remember this one, we've got all these different output encodings and all these different types of output encodings. Whereas this one, I think we just have the one place and it's a hex encoding, which can be a little more difficult. But if we can if we can get it to execute, then our goal is going to be to target somebody who has access to this web application that we don't have access to, so that we can, I'm thinking, exfiltrate data. So I think that's ultimately, we'll have to look at the compensating controls a bit more to do it. So how to weaponize, let's do the same thing down here. That's going to be our next piece, right? Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of us and start, figuring that out yet, because we've got to actually get something to execute. But just to talk through it, for our one up here for Windstream, most likely what we're going to be doing is trying to leverage this to either steal an existing session token from something or anything. Or I would think for this one, probably we're going to try to do a session routing attack on a separate subdomain. So if we can get the execute or the cross-site scripting to execute here, then we can find a misconfigured cores, or maybe they already have the two different subdomains already have a trust relationship between the two. And so we could force that user to go in on a completely separate platform and, send a request to change their password or do something that did. Maybe gather up a bunch of information and then send it in an email, because it's an email client to a email address that we control. Those are all different options. And we'll have to do a lot of digging into, we'll probably have to find the web client and figure out, what those requests would look like. There's a lot of legwork and stuff to do this here. Whereas looking at our 8x8, our goal here is going to be to try to simply get access in some way to this web application under the super site. Now, we may go and test the other ones. There's definitely a lot of opportunities with different subdomains to violate the cross origin policy to get more impact there. But this is a really clear impact that we can do. So, all right. So really at this point, I would go back and look at these two, look at everything, all the information that we've gathered, and just make a decision on which one is going to be the best use of my time. And I would start with that. Or which one do I want to do? Maybe, between these two, I think that, first of all, this one's going to take a lot less time to test. And if we do, because it's only got one attack vector, and then if we do get this to execute, I think I want to look into the content security policy a little more here. But I think looking at it, it's permissive enough that I think we have more of an opening on this one. I think getting past the output encoding and a web application firewall together can be very, very challenging and time consuming. Whereas I can at least rule this one out as a good use of my time fairly quickly. So now, in order to do that, I want to dig into this content security policy, because it's all going to be determined. And let me just see as well, before we do anything, let me see if I can see any cookie flags. They probably haven't assigned us a session token yet. So there is a PHP session that has HTTP only. I don't know if that's the one. I don't know if that's actually what they're going to use for the session, or if it's just something that's assigned in randomly. But I'm going to make the assumption that it is. So cookie flags, we have this PHP SS ID. I can put that on there as well. So most importantly, this has HTTP only, which means it's going to be, we're not going to be able to grab it with JavaScript. So we wouldn't be able to easily just grab it and send it off. So not ideal. Do we have, yeah, secure is true, sure. And only scoped to supersite.com. So it doesn't appear that this session is being used anywhere else. Now, again, they may have a completely different mechanism to handle session. I don't know yet, but that's good to know as well. So that's going to frame how we're going to do this. But all right, let's come back over here and let's see if we can figure out a really good plan to weaponize this, if we can get in it. So, and what we're going to do, we're going to go through the content security policy here bit by bit. So let's tab that out. We've got our script source there. I'm dividing this by, I think this will have to be entered as well there. Yeah. So I'm dividing by the semicolon delimiter, which separates the directives. So that's what you'll do as well. source there, form action. So as you can see, client-side injections are very time consuming. They require a lot of thought and a lot of evaluation. And this is what it really looks like. Tab this in over there. Right, so when you see people online that are going in and throwing a bunch of scanners and coming back, oh, check out this awesome cross-site scripting I got because I knew this super secret payload. I mean, yes, that can happen if you know that super secret payload and it affects specific technology, and for a little while you can spread it across. It's not reality though. Pen testing, bug bounty hunting, it's not sexy. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people want it to be. I know people want to have the, music going on in the background. That was meant to be like techno music. I don't know how it turned into a drum solo, but anyway, people want to be sitting in the dark with the techno music and all the fancy LED lights back here. No, I'm a super secret hacker. The reality is bug bounty hunting, pen testing, honestly, cybersecurity, it's boring more times than it's not. It just kind of is what it is. But, if you sit down and go through the methodology step by step, first of all, it's still fun. It's still fun to go through and do this. It's still super rewarding when you do find those vulnerabilities. You're going to find a lot more doing this. And when you go through and do it correctly, again, there's a lot of people that won't. So you're going to rule them out. You're going to get ahead of them. Okay, I'll start rambling. So we're going to look through this content security policy step by step here. And then from this, we're going to determine exactly what our plan is to weaponize this target. Looking first at the default source. Remember, the default source is essentially a fallback. Any directive that has not been given some explicit directions, whatever you call it, is going to leverage whatever's set for default source. Default source is just set to self. That is going to be the most restrictive that we're going to have. So if we just saw default source self, it's going to be really difficult for us to get a lot of things. However, we have script source, connection, image, style, form, object, frame, media. All of these are going to impact our ability to get a reflected cross-site scripting, or weaponize a reflected cross-site scripting, and they are going to overwrite what's written in the default. So I'll just go fallback will be written highly restrictive. So we just know outside of what's been written here, we're probably not going to be able to do too much else. However, that's really good because one of the first things that we see, it's really good that we have these others, because one of the first things that we see is our script source here, right? So number one, it has unsafe eval and unsafe inline. So that means if we can inject inline JavaScript, it will execute. Okay, so what that means, if it doesn't have this unsafe inline and then we come in here, and we find some way to write in like, I'm not going to try to do all that now, but if we inject into the DOM and we can actually write out script alert one script, that is an inline script. So if unsafe inline is not set, then that may not execute. Some other things will impact it, but it may not execute. So first of all, we need to make sure if we can get that. And then we also have unsafe eval, which it's more of a DOM-based type of thing, but sometimes I can go through there. But if they're using eval, we'll see more on this in the DOM-based side. If they're using eval and passing user-controlled input to it, this directive is going to allow that eval to execute in an unsafe way. Remember, eval is evil. If you ever done any coding, remember, eval is evil. That's one of the number one things they say. Don't take user-controlled input and put it in there. Don't, this happens a lot too, JSON. So you'll see people making the mistake where they're getting all these different types of JSON objects and they don't know what it's going to be. And so instead of using JSON.loadString, they use an eval and then have some conditionals on top of that. That's a pattern that I've seen a few times that I've been able to escalate. So we're good there. Now we also have the script source. And I talked a little bit about this, but we're going to dig into this a lot more. The script source tells the browser where these scripts are allowed to be loaded. So this is separate from an inline script. If we can inject an inline script, that's where you have the open and close script tags. That's where you have the JavaScript written in the actual DOM itself. However, if you don't have unsafe inline, and you can load an external script from something that's allowed within the script source here, then you can still get that JavaScript to execute. You just wouldn't be able to do an open and close script tags. You would have to go script source and it would have to come from somewhere here. So here we have, and again, I talked about this, we've got a fully qualified domain name, which I don't know, but it's probably not going to be able to get any access to this, I would certainly do some research on it, except the other things that we have, I don't need to. I've already got a path for it. But typically what I would do is load this up and just see, hey, can I go and register an account to where I'm going to get my own URL and some type of webhook or place to send information that I can use that's still under this domain. Most likely you're not going to be able to, otherwise it shouldn't be written like this. Well, I mean, it'll happen. I don't want to say that, but anyway, not going to do that here. We don't need to worry about it. We have this as well. So any 8x8 page, we can import that. So if we're unable to get a script to right here, if we didn't have the unsafe inline, we could potentially inject a script on any of these other 8x8 subdomains. And then if we're able to inject that in there, or essentially find a way to host a script, I should say that rather, we'd have to find a way to host the script there. I don't know if that's possible or not. We have a lot of different opportunities, but once we host the script there, then we could potentially inject the script source tag and pull that in, and it would allow it to come in with this 8x8. And then the most important here with the star.vc, again, as I did a little more research on it too. Anybody can go register this. So what this means is that I have the ability to either inject inline script, or I can just host my own malicious page that's a .vc and to have this big complex script on it, and I can import it in that way. So that's what I want to do. And I'm going to go ahead and come down here and weaponize it. So I want to host malicious script on star.vc, something that I register. It's going to be a complex script. And then, yeah, I mean, I think that's fine, right? I'll just do script source equals evil.vc, right? Something like that, just to show how that's going to happen. This allows us, I can go and host that on any page that I want, so evilvc / exploit.javascript. I can have whatever I want. I can have this do 100 different things. And so looking at this here, because we don't have the ability to know what's on the other end, here's how I'm going to show impact. And this is one of my favorite ways to do it. By the way, I've already decided I'm going to focus on this one, because if we could get this to work, it'd be super cool. We won't be able to show it here, but here's what I want to do. I'm going to build out a whole complex JavaScript file, and this is going to be included in my report if I've got any, that is going to gather a ton of data leveraging victim session. Right, so I'm going to have this complex script that essentially starts fuzzing for different endpoints and starts sending requests to different places. And anytime it gets, this is all going to happen in the background. And actually, the first thing I would do with this complex job file is overwrite document.body. So that's going to be the entire page of what the viewer sees with loading screen. So the first thing is going to happen, again, this is all going to be in my report. This is how I'm showing them impact. This is why I'm going from, oh, there's an alert popped, like, oh crap, somebody could do this today, right? I'm going to have a JavaScript in there that replaces the entire document.body with something that looks like it's loading. So the user kind of just sits there. That'll give them more time to allow all of that to run. And then HTTP requests, fuzz for endpoints, valid responses, right? So we'll just kind of keep gathering there. And then I'm going to set up a database and API. Potentially. Ooh, that may be more difficult as well, and I'll talk about why in a second. Okay, let's pause there. So what I would do is I would set up a database or an API that I controlled, and then didn't mean to write ask, but that's okay. As HTTP requests get valid responses, full sent to API, right? So this is a type of an attack that I love. We're going to overwrite the body with a loading page, so it looks like everything is loading. Then we are going to, in the background using Ajax, we're going to be fuzzing for all these types of different endpoints. And anytime we get a valid response, we're going to take that response and we're going to send it out to our server. Now, the problem with that is that's exfiltrating data. So we need to look at some of the other content security policy things here to exfiltrate data. And the first thing that we see right here, again, unfortunately, is connect source self. So that is going to make it much more difficult. The connect source itself, it restricts where API requests, WebSocket requests, fetch, all that type of stuff. It affects where it can go. It'll block it within the browser before that request even goes out. Remember, that's different than CORS, which the browser will allow that request to go out. It just won't pull the data back in, right? So with connection source here, we have connection source self. That means that with AJAX calls, with HTTP, we're not going to be able to exfiltrate that data specifically to these. However, there are some other ways that we can do that. One of the ways that we can do it, and cannot exfil data with API calls. Now, these other directors are important because they do control how we can potentially do this or not do it. The image source right here. What you can do, actually, I think I could potentially show it in here. Do we have an image object? Yeah. So we have an image object here. We should be able to do instantiate it dot source equals, and let's just go right, so we can set this up. I think this works. I should have tested this out before, but that's what I get. But you kind of get the point, right? So if we go in and if we can embed an image tag in here, then we can append within this the cookies that we're trying to exfiltrate, or even each one of these HTTP requests, as long as we can get it within JavaScript. So I guess this, I just need a new back here. There you go. So here you can see we actually send a request, and then content security policy is blocking that. Now, if we come over here, the reason for that is it only allows for self to point to chart Google APIs there, or this server, something right there. So, so we cannot use an image beacon to exfiltrate data to our server. But can we register something with these domains, right? So, and it would really be one of these two. So just as I mentioned before, I would have to go to each of these, and I think the chart.google APIs is probably the most likely one I can do. Do I have the ability to set up my own web server under these domains by leveraging the actual service? And then from there, can I capture the HTTP requests that are coming in? It doesn't mean that I own the server, but possibly I can leverage this service that they provide in order to bypass the content security policy here for the image. So there is some potential there, right? And I think what we'll see is if we come over here, we go up one more time to do this again, but instead we will go to, what was one of the ones? chart.googleapis.com. Now we no longer get that issue. Now we're getting a separate where it's just like, hey, this doesn't exist, but we're not getting the content security policy because we, or the violation of the content security policy because that domain is allowed within that. So that's one way that we can potentially exfiltrate data. And we're going to see that coming through a lot of these. Now, style source, on the other hand, we do have unsafe inline. So style source can potentially be a way that we can exfiltrate, or we can actually get the payload to execute. I think as well, let me see this. Yes, so this is new. This is a new feature of CSS to where you can actually put in this URL that would load in, like see a background image. This is another way that we can potentially exfiltrate data, although I haven't done that. I don't know how we would append those URLs on there, to be honest. So it's a possibility. I'm going to say able to execute. Right, this is also another opportunity where you can inject style, and then the style tag itself can be executed to, or can be escalated so that it executes JavaScript. But we don't need to worry about that too much. That would typically be used to bypass if we didn't have unsafe inline up here, which we do. Maybe exfil data with URL. I'll have to do more research into that. I remember hearing about it, but I don't know. I don't remember exactly how to do that there. So, all right, wrapping up with these last few, the form action here, self, just means when you have a form, and so a form action, anytime you have an HTML form, there should be an action attribute within that form HTML tag that either has an endpoint or it has a full URL. If it has a full URL, it's likely sending to a different domain. So instead of going to, I forget what we're on again, supersite, right? Instead of going to supersite.8x8.com, it may go just to, auth.8x8.com or whatever it may be, This form action self over here says that those actions cannot be changed to go to a different URL. So another way that we could potentially exfiltrate data is we could use JavaScript to write essentially a hidden form into the DOM, and then we would capture that and execute it all within JavaScript, and it would send that HTTP request, which is not an AJAX call. So the connection source doesn't matter as much here because it's sending out in a different way. It's not using JavaScript to send it. However, the form action self is going to prevent us from using that to exfiltrate data. All right, so wrapping up with the last few here. Object source. This has to do with like Flash and Java applets and everything. I'm not too worried about that. This is going to allow us to import some, but that's not as applicable anymore. Some browsers will block that completely, so I'm not even gonna play with that. Frame source, frame source. Frame source determines where an iframe can be loaded in. So there are some ways to exfiltrate from this. Again, we got the star VC, so I just wanna make a note of that. It is possible, if we can't figure out a way to exfil data any way else, we can possibly register a .vc and do an iframe and inject an iframe in there. So this star.vc is really opening up a lot of opportunities that we wouldn't have had otherwise there. Media source as well, right? You can exfil data potentially with the video. So if there was a star.vc again, then you can do the, I think it's video thing there, and source, just like everything else, equals evil.com, but we don't see that. I'm not even going to bother with it. This can come back there. Actually, you know what? I don't need this because we're filling everything out. And then the frame ancestors, which we've seen popped up a few different things. It can have some impact on the way that iframes loads, what different pages we can load in. Again, this star.vc basically negates it though, because we can register it. So I do think that our data exfiltration is going to be tied to this star.vc somehow. I want to find a way to, and I'm just going to kind of put this up here. Well, I guess we've already got this up here. Yeah, but this is it. So let's even go back one further. Register. Yeah. So we're going to register a malicious.vc site, which looks like it's going to help us exfiltrate data. We're going to try and send these, and then ultimately, so yeah, we're going to exfiltrate data through gaps in content security policy. So that's it. Again, I like this. I definitely want to go and just show here in a minute some fuzzing on these different outputs and trying to get the payload to execute. So we'll do it for both of them, but I'm going to do kind of some short ones here. Then I'm going to come in and we'll really kind of dig in and try to get, use multiple different strategies to try to get the payload to execute. But that's it. I mean, we have a very good plan here, right? Who's our victim? We're going to try to find somebody who has a valid account on this 8x8 super site, which is something that you can't register for. So we know there's value there. At least we can't find a way. So we know that they want to keep people out. And we know that we only want individual, like real users to be accessing this application. So that's the person we're going to target. Ideally, they can have a higher version of privileges, and we can try to do some research on what those access controls and everything might be. But we are going to deliver it with a phishing attack where the payload is going to be included within this destination get parameter. And before we do that, we're going to register a malicious VC site. We are going to host a malicious JavaScript file that is going to be incredibly complex, and our goal is going to be to exfiltrate data in some way. So the two things that we need to do now is we need to find a way to get this to execute, and then if we do that, we need to find a way to get through these gaps in the CSV to actually exfiltrate data. So we've got two steps now to a valid client-side injection on this one here. So I'm going to take a short break and come back and we'll actually go through that process, testing on both of these. And then I'm going to go ahead and move over to stored cross-site scriptings and we will do everything that we just did there. So I'll be back in a second. And I'm back. So the last thing that we have to do for this target here, we know who our victim is. Specifically, we know how we're going to deliver the payload to the victim. We know what our plan is, how we're going to weaponize it. We know that the way we're going to weaponize it is going to work within the security controls. We've tested the content security policy specifically here. So the only thing that we need to do is bypass output encoding and get this single or double quote rather to render. Now, when we do this, come and just load this here. And we'll do most of this through Burp Suite, but just to show within the actual browser, I'll come search for arson. Now, where our payload is being reflected, right now this is the only payload that we know we have, it's being reflected directly within the payload here, and it's not being processed. So it's not being changed, no output encoding. So this looks like the work of a virtual DOM. And I want to come back up here and see. Now I don't see that here. So that's strange. It's being loaded in a way that looks like it's not being processed, or maybe these aren't actually being processed. It could also just be written in by something like an inner HTML or anything where it's not actually being rendered in and of itself. That is strange. I'm surprised to see that, because I think if we check some other, like if we do a greater than, less than here, and again, we'll do the same search for it. Yeah, so now we're seeing the output encoding. So let's come back over here. We need to talk about the output encoding before we start worrying about CSRF. And what do we have? We have a greater than symbol gets converted into, and I do it like this to make it a little easier. So our greater than symbol turns into ampersand GT. Let me go on. So that's like some proper output encoding, which you would expect to see, and then it's going to be rendered in there. However, it is strange to see that does not get modified, or encoded rather, encoded. However, it does not get processed in the DOM as well, right? So the methodology that we're going to use to try and bypass this or get this to work is the same. I'm actually going to show that methodology up here because there's just so many different options for output encoding that I think it's going to be much more interesting to look at with this one. I think we're going to learn a lot more from looking at it. But ultimately, that's it. Ultimately, what we need to do is we need to get this single quote. Because of where this payload is rendering within the DOM, it's rendering within an HTML attribute, basically an attribute of an HTML element, the input element specifically. We have to break out of this value here, and then we can add additional attributes or potentially add a, the greater than symbol, and then we could create our own elements within this div. But fundamentally, that's what we have to do. We have our game plan. We know how we're going to deliver it. We have to break out of that. So what we're going to do is a lot of fuzzing. Now this can be slow, manual, methodic fuzzing. It can be automated fuzzing, right? You typically want to do a combination of both, and we'll walk through those a little bit here. But that's really the goal. At this point, if we can break out of this HTML element in some way, specifically the attribute, but ideally the entire HTML element itself, then we can most likely get a very effective working payload. So again, the methodology is going to be the same, but we are going to focus here on our WinStream net, where it has multiple different output encodings. And let's actually, well, we've got those broken up a bit here. So yeah, you can see on this one in the title, we've got a proper output encoding with the ampersands. Over here, we have it, this is in the entire object. So we are using Unicode down here. So a completely different way to do that. Once again, here we see the same encoding, although the actual encoding that we're looking at, or that we're looking to find, I think, is going to be right here, the %3 Charlie and 3 Echo, because this was ultimately like an arson tag put in there. So here we have HTML tagging or encoding. We have a typical one right here, and then we have, yeah, some typical ones right there as well. So let's kind of get these labeled, right? And I'm sure this has some type of a name, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head, and I think that is fine. Let's see, the images here. This one is going to be hex encoding, and then finally we have and type, typical, and typical right here. Okay. So that kind of helps us break it up. So we have 5 different attack vectors that are coming from, or 5 different opportunities to bypass the output encoding for every single unique character that we have. So this is the reason that I like targets like this for trying to get the payload to execute. And remember, we're going to have to deal with the web application firewall as well. But this attack vector here is loaded in 5 separate places that have 5 different areas where they have to properly encode all the different user controlled input that could be coming from an attacker. So there's a lot of complexity. Remember, I love complexity. Complexity leads to vulnerabilities. So that's what we are going to look for here. Now I'm going to go ahead. I'll tell you what, I can just reload this here. I got blocked. Did I include a payload or something? What happened? This is trying to go to somewhere else. I don't know why that happened. Let me come up here. Don't tell me I got put on some type of block list or anything. Oh, I must have gotten blocked because we were doing the fuzzing. Okay, so this is why web application firewalls can be challenging. Yeah, so we have sent too many requests, and now we're not, that came from, if you remember, we were doing like our param miner, and we were fuzzing for these over here. So we just ultimately sent too many requests, and we hit the distributed denial of service block on Cloudflare there. So let's do this. I'm going to pause the video for a second. I'll get a VPN set up, and then we should be able to test successfully there. 1 second. All right, so we got a VPN running, coming in from a new VPN, right? It checks the VPN for the DDoS protection on Cloudflare, so we're good to go there. So we can go ahead and continue our testing. We are going to do manual testing for the most part, so we won't get that block again. But yeah, all right, so we're loading this up. Let me go ahead and reload it here just so it's on the top of the browser. I'll tell you what, we can go ahead and close out of this. Just discard it, that's fine. I'm not going to use it here. Come to our proxy, and here we see the request that we want to test. So let's send this one more time, and we see our arson. And actually, that's right. So we need to find a completely new canary, something that won't give us any results there. So let's do this. Now we have 9. Let's just copy the entire canary and see what happens, because the arson may still be showing up in something. Oh, we still have 9. Okay, so that's more than I remembered having. Oh, that's right, but there's a bunch of ones that are very similar. So these are all going to have the same type of attack vector in there, and that piece there. Okay, easy enough. So what we need to do is we need to start figuring out how these different output encodings are handled. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to add in a less than, greater than. We don't want to put in a full script or anything, because that's going to get blocked by the web application firewall. We want these. We want to put in a sequence of unique characters that we know we want to use to bypass the output encoding and just see how it's handling it. We've already done this to a point, but we're going to look at all of them back to back. So let's really start with the 3 main ones here, because it's right. We're going to need open and close, to be able to open or close an HTML tag, so the greater than or less than, or we're probably going to need double quotes for just about all of them, right? So this, and let's make sure that covers all our payloads. So this payload here, we're going to have to put in an HTML tag in some way. So we are going to need that greater than, less than. Down here, we're in JSON, so we're going to need the double quote in order to break out of this. Now, can this value here be used to possibly do a DOM-based cross-site scripting or anything else? Yes, and that's something that we would look at as well when we combine this into an entire methodology. But for now, just looking at reflected cross-site scripting, so we need a double quote. In here, same thing, we are in an HTML attribute, so we need a double quote in order to break out. Same thing in each of these. We're in the href attribute, so we got to get a double quote for all of those. And then finally here, we're in the middle of this strong that's in a div, or a paragraph that's in a div. Here we would need to have open or close there. So fundamentally, in order to bypass the output encoding of anything, we need to get one of these three characters to render. So let's just see how it handles these. And hopefully the WAF is not going to kick us back. It's not. So yeah, we can see they're all being encoded there. Here we've got the Unicode. Unicode, although our double quote there looks like it's not being encoded. I mean, this looks like it's processing typically. Let me see what happens when we do a comma, right? Because the next value that we would need would be a comma here. And let's just do a whole thing. Arson. Let's see if I can inject that. Okay, we're not getting kickback from the WAF. We're coming through here. All of that is being encoded. So they're definitely concerned about anything rendering directly in the DOM. Oh, you know, this would need to be a colon, wouldn't it? I don't know what I was thinking there. So we see it's not really being processed. Let's show this response in the browser. Copy that. I mean, it does look like it's doing something, right? Here you can see where the output encoding is being loaded in there, but remember in the actual request, we can see it, so this may look deceptive. And then once it's actually loaded into the DOM, we see that there is some escaping happening there, right? So the / here to start the Unicode, so that's one character, and then we have a / starting before our double quote. So that is preventing us from actually controlling or writing directly into the inline script there. Now, again, there may be ways to bypass it. I'm actually more bullish about this one specifically compared to any of the other ones, but that's good there. And then what about in here? Here we're seeing all the typical output encoding. I'm not seeing that we're going to be able to break out of that. Same thing, all hex encoding. Hex encoding, ironically, is one of the most difficult ones to break out of, as long as they don't do any processing on the back end. If they just take this raw thing, they don't ever decode it, and they put it right back out, which sometimes they do, I'd say more often than not they do, then it's ironically, it's one of the simpler implementations, but it's also one of the most effective. All right, let's come down here. Whoops, 8, 9. And number 9, yeah, we've got all our encodes here. So out of all the ones, the JSON payload looks most interesting with this one, but that's fine. We don't know for sure right here. So let's go ahead and send this again. We've got all of our 9 payloads. So that's what I'm going to start doing. And I know I have it laying around here somewhere, but you know what? I bet it's in here. Hold on. I'm going to do this on the camera. Forget it. Y'all know that everything in the background actually is used. Yes, that is. All right. This book right here. JavaScript for Hackers, Gareth Hayes. This is where you're going to use the methodologies in this book. This is the most effective. I got stickers falling out from DEF CON. This is the most effective way to do this. This is what I'm going to do here. I would sit here for a while. I would go through this book. I would read through this book. I would understand everything about it. And then I would come and try these manual bypass techniques, understanding the way JavaScript works. That is the most effective. Very time consuming, very difficult, obviously, but I cannot recommend this enough. Long term, if you want to hunt for client-side injections, you know, especially cross-site scripting and everything, you need to get to this level where you have memorized this book and you have a manual methodology to go through and really apply the intricacies of JavaScript into your testing. So this is what that manual testing looks like, right? We would go in and use different codes, different payloads, manually one by one, and looking through each of the different outputs, we would find what the results of that were, right? Is it having any impact? Are we getting to bypass anything? That's obviously going to be way too time consuming. That's a whole other series of videos and everything to do. So I'm going to leave you to kind of go off and do your own methodology. It's also super advanced, but that's where you want to get to. That's the goal. That's where the field post or the goal posts are. But let's go ahead and move over to some automated testing a little bit, because The next thing that I'm going to do, I would go ahead and send this to the intruder, just like we did before. We're going to start a new one, but I'm going to put my payload here at the end where there's really no characters or anything. And now I want to go ahead and load up some payloads from here. I'll go back in sec list. We're going to go to fuzzing. And within fuzzing, we're going to find some payloads here. So things like special characters. Let's go ahead and get that loaded up. Let's load up special characters URL encoding, right? We'll see down here we have a lot of these. Actually, you know what? Let's clear these because I like having the, oh, cleared them all. Shoot, didn't mean to do that. Okay, come back here to the regular special characters, get that in there. But I also want to do, if we come up here to URI hex, let's open this up. This is going to have every possible hex sequence, including some of these characters like null characters and everything that we are not expecting. And so I'm going to come over here as well, and I'm going to add in our 3 main characters. We're going to do the greater than, or that's opposite, you know, less than, greater than, and then a double quote, because some unexpected ASCII characters like this may end up causing the application, the output encoding to break, right? It may ignore everything that's further on it. It may cause something to break and go into a try-catch, and the try-catch is going to allow that raw data to go through. That's what I'm hoping. So I'm putting the payload here where it's going to test some of these characters where I can see it, but then I also want to see if anything's going to break and possibly have an impact on that as well. Now, I want to keep adding in some different things. We have our big list of naughty strings is a fun one to do. This includes a bunch of extra stuff, but right, just kind of gets to some more specific payloads, throws a bunch of just different things out there to see what happens. Some of them are applicable to this, some of them are not. I can do a command injection as well. You know, I typically just kind of try to feel it, but right, we're just throwing, fuzzing is throwing unexpected input at the web application and seeing how it responds. So that's essentially what we're going to do. And I think the last one, I'll just come over here to the XSS and let's try some, let's do ones with JSON headers. Why not? He's got a couple that are down there that are very good. All right, so we've got a bunch of different unexpected input that we are going to throw at this web application. Let's go ahead and do that, but I am going to, where's our resource pool? I'm going to dial this back a little bit so we don't hit a block. So I'm going to do my low and slow, which if you've seen in my live streams or other videos and stuff, you know that I do this a lot. 2 concurrent, let's put 150 milliseconds between that with random intervals, and we'll do some automated throttling. Actually, the throttling itself, what was the response that we were getting before when we were getting blocked? We were getting a 403, so that's what we want. So we want to actually forget this. We want to do, if we start hitting a 403, then go ahead and start throttling it because we know that we're getting blocked. So, all right, so let's go ahead and run that. And it'll go a little slower, right? We'll let it keep going through here. And interesting, the length is 409 response there. So, okay, we'll come back and take a look in a second. I just want to let it go. And in the meantime, so this is one way that you can do automated testing. You can go and throw a bunch of different payloads at it. Or a bunch of different characters, a bunch of different sequences, right? You're gonna do fuzzing, and then we're gonna go through and manually look at what the differences are. You can automate this as well. The problem with automating, especially like known client-side and like cross-site scripting, is that it's not going to fire the alert without seeing it. So you have to have something that loads it up in a headless browser, or you have to have an automated scanner that writes to console log or anything like that. So let's just do a quick search. Let's go GitHub XSS scanner. Let's just try that and see, because there's a bunch of different tools. I don't typically use these, to be honest. I'm sure they're great. I just, I have my methodology and I like to use my own. This looks like a really great one though. So, and you can see the types of payloads. I mean, they're going to be doing the exact same thing that I'm showing manually. It's just all going to be going through on an automated thing. I'm sure this has a headless browser component where it's opening up, but I would definitely do this. And, I'm not going to go through the process of showing how to install and run any of these. The goal of this video is to show a methodology, how to teach a methodology. But at the same time, if you're looking at this point and you're saying, okay, Harrison, I need you to stop and, I really need you to show me how to do this. You're not at the point where you can be testing for client-side injections. I'm sorry, that's just the reality. If you don't know how to download, install, and use a basic command line tool like this, then you need to pause what you're doing and go back and learn that, learn some basic, Linux stuff out. Like that is going to be a critical thing that you'll need to know. So again, I'm not going to show these in the videos. If that's something you want me to show, I would recommend hitting pause, going, all you need to do is use it, right? Get a free version of Kali Linux, go through the things. It's easy, right? And it's got instructions on how to do it. Like right here, this is literally how it's 4 commands to install and use. So, but yeah, I definitely recommend using these, especially in your automated system. But just remember, everybody else has access to these. So if everybody else has access to these open source and everybody's using the same payloads, then your bug bounty hunting becomes less about finding something other people haven't found and more about speed. Now, you also go to heavy recon where you're doing a lot of recon to try to find targets that haven't been tested, and then you can do these. But it's much less likely that you're going to find a target that someone hasn't found doing recon compared to finding a unique string in this unique set of compensating controls and their unique output encoding that will potentially bypass all of those things. That's just more, they're both difficult, but that's just a little bit more likely. So definitely spend some time going through and testing these. The other thing that I want to show is, and I've talked about this in my first video, but polyglots. Polyglots are, let's just do, here's one here. Just look for a GitHub one. A polyglot is a really unique sequence of strings that is designed to execute in several different environments. So this is something that I would definitely leverage as we're trying to get this payload to execute. And again, if you haven't seen part 1 of these, go back and watch part 1 because it's all about getting these payloads to execute. And that's why I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to focus on weaponization. But polyglots are great, right? You get all these different types of polyglots. Build them into a word list. There's a ton of word lists that are out there. In fact, let's just see, doing some simple searches. GitHub, word list. I mean, I know we have some just in the sec list folder that we were looking at too, but these have a bunch of separate ones in there. XSS without an alert. Yeah, see there's some good ones there. This looks like it'll make a callback back to a server, so that's how they're detecting whether or not it's executing, which is another great way to do it, kind of treating it like a blind cross-site scripting, which is a whole different video. I'm not going to go down that path as well, but oh, and perfect. So the last thing that I was going to show for the automated testing that in my opinion is a perfect middle ground between the two is going to be this here. So you've got this cheat sheet that was created by Gareth Hayes and the team over at Portswigger that has just a crazy, I mean, really like everything that you can think of to try to do different combinations of payloads and even ones that maybe only work for individual browsers. Now, for bug bounty hunting, you want to stay away from this. Stay with all the browsers. You don't want to do something that's only going to execute on Safari. Typically, that's not going to be within scope. Very rarely is it. I don't even mess with it when it comes to bug bounty hunting. So stay within all browsers. But this has a lot of opportunities for granularity, especially, let's say, if you can get some of these characters to load, but then maybe it's still not executing, or there's just 1 or 2 characters that don't work, because these have a lot of different variation to where, if they're blocking on alert, well, maybe this console log will happen, blocking on scripts. It's got, here's one from videos, audio controls, SVGs, anchor tags right there. So all types of different ones. This is going to be my recommendation. And you can get the full, you have all these here and you can copy the payloads to your clipboard there. And when you come back over here to Intruder, let's just do, let's send this to Intruder again. So we just have another one and we can paste this. You can see it's super, super easy to go through and build out your different payloads here. To populate it. So this is my favorite way. I don't typically just copy and paste. I will go through and identify like what's working, what's not working. I start with the individual manual characters. I move on to this type of thing. I definitely throw a bunch of payloads that are known to it, but a lot of times I just assume those are already going to be found. So these are all the strategies that we can use to get the alert to pop, essentially, to find out that we have a successful client-side injection. And again, if your hope right now is that I'm going to do a real deep dive into this, I'm not, because I cover that in a 5-hour video, part 1. So please, you can go back and watch part 1, and that should give you all the answers you need to go through and try to get this to execute. All right, let's come back to looking at here. We can go ahead and pause the attack. I don't want to keep going too far, but let's start by just looking for some variations just to see what happened. Uh-oh, and I think we even, well, these are 4. Okay, so we're getting 400 response, bad requests from some things too. So we're definitely getting a lot of variation. All right. So we want to come over here to the response. We want to bring this up a little bit. And now again, there's much better ways that we can do this with automation, but this is how I typically prefer to do it, at least to start with, as I'm starting to see how these are responding, you know? So here, first of all, the output encoding doesn't know what to do with a lot of these more complex characters. These are things that are going to be like emojis, Chinese characters, anything that takes a very large number of ASCII characters. It doesn't really know how to kick those off. Now, it's not affecting the other encoding that we have, at least not from what I can see. We're not seeing we're not seeing anything break and then it doesn't find it. Strange that we have 14 instances of arson on here though. Okay, so once again, coming into here, now we do see that. Was that always there? Was I looking at that early? I probably was. It's so hard to take everything in as I'm recording this. I go back and watch these later and I see things that I miss all the time, and it just like I smash my palm into my forehead. Sometimes it's painful to rewatch these for me, but it's good. You know, the goal was just to show what it really looks like. This is real bug bounty hunting. You know, and people make mistakes all the time, or you miss stuff, and that's why you just keep hammering at it. Okay, not seeing any impact there. This just turned into a wild thing there. Oh, this is interesting. So the SC that we found earlier, it's being appended here. I don't know what we could do with that, but maybe that's why including the SC breaks it. That's strange, but yeah, still seeing a lot of hex coming through there. And what I'm hoping to see is some of those special characters that we included actually written into the DOM here. I don't know if we saw this before, so this is kind of strange. We're still not seeing any of those special characters, and this is just one, right? So let's, you know, a lot of these, because it's being reflected, oh, this was just something that was written in there. Okay, let's come down here a little bit. Let's find some more interesting payloads. And these are all, trying to see any major variations in length, but let's just take a look at these, right? So we've got all these different ones here, these different hex values that are going to be converted in. And usually I'm like, I really want to know what the null byte does. Let's just see if any values are converting here. Again, this is going to be super, super tedious. Yeah, see, so there's a very strange Unicode character that I wouldn't expect to see, but we're not breaking out. Those are still all being encoded. Those are still all being encoded as well. So yeah, we're not seeing any breakout on this. A little bit of a different encoding going there, all hex as opposed to these are different. I'm not liking that. So you can see how this is going to be a tedious, time-consuming process. I don't know if null, what was the payload here? So this just sent null right before that. Yeah, so that's just going to be written there. Do we have the, let's go all the way down to the bottom. Let's see some very strange variations here. So these didn't even work. And now that could be, they could also just be taken a little bit, but let me see what happens here. Oh, it does. It's just hitting the, I think I'm actually hitting a DDoS block now on this. So let me, go ahead and switch on Proton VPN. Once we see it connected there, we should be able to make that request. No, so I guess this is just being blocked because of the payload then. It's not actually the IP address or a DDoS block. Yep, yeah, that's true there. Okay. come back, show another couple. So I just want to see if there's anything that's a really big outlier. These 400 responses are strange. Oh, maybe it's just a space. It's causing it to do that. I wonder why. Let's see. Okay, so all these are 102. Any bad requests there? And then we come into the forbidden. So yeah, not a huge amount of variation there. Okay, so that's essentially it, right? Remember, manual, start out with your JavaScript for hackers, get a manual methodology. That's going to go through. You're going to try all different types of combinations, characters that can be replaced with other characters, right? In fact, I can do a quick Google search for that. I didn't know exactly how to do that there, but yeah, here's a good example, right? So if it's expecting an A, we need to bypass an A. It's possible that some of these characters, will work instead. That's typically more common for things like account takeover. So maybe you can register an account that will ultimately become the same username or same identifier that's being linked back to it or something. But this is something that we're going to try. But go through, try all the different ways that to manipulate JavaScript itself manually. You're also going to do all the different automated payloads, and ultimately you've just got to keep trying. It's just fuzzing, right? Fuzzing is throwing a bunch of unexpected input at the target and trying to find out when it behaves differently. You're trying to ultimately understand how they're doing that output encoding in all the different places, all the different ways, so that you can come back and circumvent it. All right, let's come back over here to this. We can open this up. Once again, final time I'll say it. If you want to learn more about actually getting that to execute, go watch part 1. But for the sake of this part's already a lot longer than I meant it to be, so I want to go ahead and move on here. I'm going to go ahead and get everything set up for our stored cross-site scripting, and then that's what we're going to focus on. And we're just going to look at the setup builder here as the last major piece of this first hunting session where we're looking at reflected and stored cross-site scripting. Once that's done, we're going to go back. We're going to let our script find targets for DOM-based cross-site scripting and client-side prototype pollution, and we're going to go into the second main hunting phase, and then the third hunting phase of this video. This video is going to end up being like 10 hours long. I swear I did not plan to do this, but I really want to show this. We're going to go into Grammarly. We're going to put the whole methodology together. We're going to figure out real-world ways that we can do an account takeover within Grammarly if everything goes wrong. We're going to find some targets, some attack vectors to go in and test, and then that'll be mostly it. You'll be able to put everything together. So I'll be back. For you, it'll be a second. For me, it'll be a little bit while I get some stuff set up, and I will record the final part of the reflected and stored cross-site scripting hunting session here. So, yeah.